In theory, America is a representative democracy with free and fair elections, and due to the nature of candidate selection, numerically, voters in America vote in the most amount of elections in the world. Now, some may suggest that this is a great deal of direct participation and makes the US highly democratic. Voters can help select candidates in parties they aren't members of, something we don't have in the UK, whereas our last two prime ministers have been selected by 191,000 members of the Conservative Party out of a population of 66.65 million. However, turnout in America is below the UK, with 55.7% voting in the 2016 US presidential election and 53.4% in the 2018 midterm elections, whereas in the UK, turnout ranges from 61 to 67%. Additionally, in 2016, it was found by US intelligence services in the Mueller report that the Russian government interfered in the US presidential election with the goal of harming the campaign of Hillary Clinton. Now, the Internet Research Group, based in St. Petersburg, is described as a troll farm, created thousands of American social media accounts, supposedly supporting radical political groups, and planned and promoted events in support of the Trump campaign against Clinton. Now, this happens between 2013 and 2017 and reached millions and millions of social media users. They fabricated articles and disinformation, and the Russian military intelligence service were also found to have infiltrated the Democratic Party systems and released stolen files and emails through the campaign. They contacted Trump's organizations and offered damaging information. Now, Obama issued economic sanctions and publicly warned Russia, and in April 2020, the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee concluded that the intelligence community assessment was actually proper and not politically motivated when it's reached its conclusions of Russian interference in American elections. Okay, so returning to the setup of elections, the Founding Fathers decided that members of the House would have a short 2-year term to ensure that they were highly sensitive to public opinion, especially if they ever wanted to get elected again. But this doesn't take into account a number of other factors. So this is clearly ignoring the impact of gerrymandering and the first past the post system has in the American election system. So thinking about the question how you become a party candidate for your state or district, well, in America it's complicated. So most states have primary elections, which decide which candidate will be on the November general election ballot for both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Some hold conventions, and those who represent a major political party are automatically on the same state ballot, especially if there's no one to challenge you. Before 1913, senators were chosen by their state legislators, but the 17th Amendment to the US Constitution required senators to be elected by a direct vote. Independent candidates have to sign an affidavit showing their desire, and a petition signed by a minimum number of voters in that state must be affiliated with the party that they want to represent. They also need to raise or spend more than £5,000 in contributions, and once on the ballot, they're elected by first past the post rule. In a case of no majority, then it's a runoff election between the top two candidates. Now, members of the House and the Senate are elected in single-member constituencies, with senators being elected in a state, meaning they have a greater legitimacy than the congressman or woman who represent a district area. For the senators, they've been voted for by more people, so they have to meet a minimum requirement in both sets of candidacies of citizenship, age, and living in their districts or in the correct place. So to break down the election process a little bit further, in both the presidential elections and congressional elections, you can have primaries, but only when there's more than one candidate who wants to represent the party for that seat. So the idea behind a primary is that there is one for the Democrats and one for the Republicans, and this system operates in the same way for the party nomination, like I said, for the presidential candidates. Each state is going to have a public vote, but a voter can only vote in one of the party's primaries. Open primaries are where voters do not need to be affiliated, so linked to the political party. They don't need to be an official member, and they can do this on the day that they actually vote. California and Washington have these systems, and there are 22 states which operate these systems. 14 states have at least one political party conducting closed primaries, where only registered voters for that political party are entitled to vote. So Connecticut, for all parties, Oklahoma and South Dakota have this kind of system for the Republican Party. 15 states have a semi-closed primary where those unaffiliated can participate in the one of their choice, and those who are affiliated with the party can only select the candidate for their party. So places such as Alaska have this for the Republicans, Oklahoma and South Dakota for the Democratic Party. So it's really key to remember that parties operate differently in different states in how they actually select their candidates. And candidates compete to win delegates, and states have a number of these which reflect the makeup of the population. So this is generally in the presidential election. They're party activists who agree to go to party conventions to vote for specific candidates according to how the votes in the state have also been represented. Republicans generally offer a winner takes all, but do sometimes have a proportional representation system in some states, and Democrats largely operate a proportional system. Just to complicate things further, some states actually have primary elections, as you can see here. In a caucus state, there's a public meeting and a debate before voting. Now, again, generally this is presidential elections. Groups stand and raise their hands for voting. They can also move to areas which represent different candidates. And you can also have individual candidates who obviously can just file the paperwork themselves and don't have to go through this process for candidate selection. So the key takeaway from all of this is that do not generalize in your answers. If you're going to use an example, you need to know how a candidate was selected in their state, their district, or secured the nomination of president, if that is what you're talking about. So all these elections then lead to obviously representation in Congress. So we need to think about how representative Congress actually is. So first of all, incumbency tends to be a problem. There tends to be high rates of incumbency in US senators, and they use the length of their office to increase their popularity, particularly if they're able to introduce clauses to bills to benefit their areas. This is generally called pork barreling and earmarking, and they can attract large donations and have a proven track record to win over their voters. Now, as with the UK, there are a large number of safe seats. Gerrymandering sees district boundaries drawn to make sure that it covers enough of these groups of people so that they can elect the correct party candidates. And as we can see here, Maryland's 3rd district is particularly strange because obviously they're looking to return the right party member. And you will see the others: Texas's 33rd district, Illinois' 4th district, etc. Additionally, Congress, especially the Senate, can be seen to be largely unrepresentative, but it doesn't mean that they don't necessarily reflect the views of their citizens. So these figures represent the 116th US Congress sitting in 2020. So as we can see, African Americans are highly underrepresented in the makeup of members of Congress. Doesn't mean they're underrepresented in their views in Congress. And in the Senate, there are only 2 openly LGBT senators and only 6 congressmen and women who, again, at present are openly LGBT in Congress.